Hello, my name is Abdullah. I'm an engineer, a student of philosophy, and the host of the Dhawq podcast. That's DHAWQ. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I'm very happy to be collaborating with my dear friend Zaidan from Salsabil History. Over the next few months, we'll be bringing to you the works of academics within the field of Islamic philosophy, history, and mysticism. We hope that you continue supporting the channel and continue to like the videos, and we hope that you really enjoyed the material that we bring to you. Thank you. Hello and welcome back to the Dhawq podcast. Today is another very special episode. Today's guest is actually our first returning guest to the episode. I've had the pleasure of interviewing many academics and some brilliant minds over the last 2-3 years, but when I say this, it's with the utmost honesty that the episode that I recorded with this particular guest was by far my favorite. It was on a topic that was very close to my heart. When I first started the podcast back in 2022, this was the area of research that I was really interested in. And he actually explained it so well, and the concepts were disseminated in a way that just went from the mind to the heart in a beautiful fashion. And I'm very happy to have Dr. Mukhtar Ali joining us again on the podcast. Dr. Ali, thank you so much for coming on to our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much.
Back. Thank you.
It's an honor. I won't go into your full introduction. I'm sure you need no introduction anymore. All of our listeners, they are aware of your work and who you are. But just for those who are new to our podcast, Dr. Mukhtar Ali is an associate professor of Islamic Studies at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. And we're going to get into more of his work in just a bit. But as I mentioned, the last podcast episode that we recorded with Dr. Ali was on the topic of philosophical Sufism. And that was also the title of his book. And that actually explained the philosophy of Ibn Arabi and Ibn Arabi's Akbarian metaphysics. Today, however, we're very excited to talk to Dr. Ali about his new book, which is called The Inscriptions of Wisdom. So first of all, Dr. Ali, congratulations on publishing that book. I'm sure it's going to be an amazing contribution to this world of academia. Thank you for publishing that.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. So for the listeners who may be new to this tradition, I'd just like to start off by asking, what moved you to dedicate years of your life to, translating these particular texts and working on this particular work? What was it that really motivated you to do that?
The main motivation for delving into the school of Ibn Arabi in the way that I have throughout my career from the very beginning, my first work, in fact, my PhD dissertation was on Muqaddamat al-Qaysari, which was the introduction, Qaysari's introduction to his commentary on the Fusus al-Hikam. And that was the point of departure for my whole career. And it was also the very first text that I studied with my own teacher. And so it was, we can say that it really was initiated by my teacher that I start on this trajectory, on this path. And it was unspoken. It wasn't something that, it was planned. It was just that's just what happened. The first thing that I studied with him was Muqaddamat al-Qaysari. And then, so one thing led to another. I decided that Qaysari is such a brilliant text that I wrote a commentary trying to understand this book. I mean, the commentary is more than anything a way for the author to unravel the mysteries of a text. And so that's why I wrote Philosophical Sufism. But since Muqaddamat al-Qaysari is the introduction to Fusus al-Hikam, or the commentary of Fusus al-Hikam, it only made sense that I would now approach the Fusus itself and not just be content or suffice with the introduction, the Muqaddama, but also now delve into the Ma'arif of the Fusus. And yet again, in the same fashion that I produced Qaysari, not necessarily at the behest of my teacher, but in conjunction with the teachings of my teacher, Dr. Akram al-Majid, we had also started studying Jami's commentary, uh, نقش الفصوص نقد النصوص في شرح نقش الفصوص. A lot of these names sound similar, even though I've written a huge book on this. I still get it confused. So Jami's commentary on the Naqsh al-Fusus, which I'll explain momentarily what that is, we started studying with my teacher. And again, that was the impetus for me to translate this work, to delve into it deeper. And once you get into this a work like this, it really is it draws you in. It has a pull. And so that was pulled into translating it, to writing a commentary, to studying it, to looking at other commentaries. And it was a world, it was an alam in itself. So that's kind of the brief backstory behind why these three texts and how I ended up working on Jami's text.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Before I ask the next question, I wanted to actually bring up something which is a bit of a tangent, but it's relevant to this topic for sure. Um, Maulana Jami, so Abdurrahman Jami, actually he's one of those characters that are extremely popular in Muslim discourse, especially in the East. So I'm originally from Pakistan, and you Jami, Rumi, Sadi, these are household names in Pakistan. And in particular, Jami, there is a poem attributed to Jami in Sufi discourse back home, which goes along the lines of Tanam farsudan ja para zehijra ya Rasulallah. So it is an ode to the Prophet. And so that's how I was introduced to Jami when I was a young kid. And my grandfather would recite this poem. And so that's why he has a very special place in my heart and in the heart of a lot of our listeners, I'm sure. So I wanted to ask, could you tell us a little bit about this character of Maulana Abdurrahman Jami? And then could you segue into the next point, which is that your book has essentially two different texts. So you've got the anthology by Jami, but then you also have the Naqsh, which is essentially Ibn Arabi's own, if I'm not mistaken, his own summary of the Fusus or his own commentary on the Fusus. Um, so I guess my question is twofold. A, could you tell us a little bit about the character of Maulana Jami? And B, these two texts, um, especially the Naqsh, like why do you think Ibn Arabi actually felt the need to write a text like that? And how is that different from, other commentaries which are not by the man himself?
Right. I think to understand the relevance of Jami here, it's probably more important to talk about the text first. So, in other words, the text precedes the commentator. And we only look at Jami as I mean, Jami was a great figure unto himself, a great poet, a great scholar, a a great commentator of Ibn Arabi's writings. But the question, why did I choose Jami's commentary over other commentators, for example, or what's special about Jami's character? So that question about the person, we'll try to see if we can answer afterwards. First, let's talk about the text itself. And the text, the commentator follows the text in terms of both outwardly in the world and also in terms of priority, in terms of what constitutes in my own book, in my own understanding of things, um, it it's more, to me it makes more sense to look at the words and the meanings, the ma'ani. Then we can look at the other aspects of it, of such as commentary or different editions and so on. So let's talk about Fusus and Naqsh al-Fusus. Naqsh al-Fusus is Ibn al-Arabi's own distillation or his own commentary on the Fusus. In other words, he wrote a book called Fusus al-Hikam, which he had seen in a dream. In other words, the reality or the book itself, he claims to have seen in a dream that the Prophet had given him this text and says, this is Fusus al-Hikam, write it down exactly and don't omit anything and so on. So Ibn al-Arabi uses that as the basic foundation for this work, Fusus al-Hikam. Now, this book is not only his metaphysics, his cosmology, but also his prophetology. In other words, the focal point of all of these discussions, cosmological, theological discussions, they all revolve around the prophetic figures, Adam, Isa, Ibrahim, Sulaiman, and so on. And that's the whole book. The whole book is these individuals. But the particular relationship between divinity and that insan al-kamil, the perfect individual who we call a prophet. Ibn Arabi sees this book as essential, as extremely important. So important that he writes what is known as a distillation, not a summary. Because the Naqsh is not really a summary of Fusus. It is a extraction, a distillation. And the word itself, the word Naqsh, means engraving or inscription. And so there's this idea that the fuss is the bezel, is the ring stone. So here's a stone. So this is the fuss of a ring. And the fuss contains an inscription, meaning the sir of the fuss, of the authority or the seal of the ring. The ring itself is a seal. It's symbolic of authority. It's symbolic of a lot of things. In this case, it symbolizes quintessential knowledge. So the fuss of a thing, fuss al-hikmah, the quintessential wisdom or principle. So hikmah is not to mean, for example, a wise saying, an aphorism. Here it means the quintessential principle, the hikmah, the guiding principle of this particular prophet is encapsulated in this chapter, in this fuss. And the sir, or the secret of that fuss, is the naqsh, the engraving. So the naqsh al-fusus, the inscription of the fusus, is the essential, the sir, the inner secret of the fusus. The fusus itself are secrets, are mysteries, spiritual mysteries. Now the whole of Ibn Arabi's corpus is all about mystical knowledge. But mystical knowledge is tiered. Not all of it is equal. Not every mukashafa is on the same plane. So there are asrar of the asrar. And there are asrar which pertain to the cosmos, asrar which pertain to the human being, or asrar of the ruh. And then the highest level are the asrar rububiyyah, the asrar that pertain to divinity. So not all the asrar, meaning inner mysteries of things, are on the same playing field. They don't have the same intensity. So the naqsh al-fusus is the sir of the sir. And it's only 10 pages, it's very short, and it's very dense. And Jami decides to write a commentary on this book, Naqsh al-Fusus. And he draws from the earliest commentators, such as Qunawi and Kashani and Qaisari and Jandi and so on. And these are the earliest commentators of the whole Ibn Arabi tradition. Why? Because they lived during the time, more or less, around. Qunawi was a direct disciple of Ibn Arabi. Jandi was a direct disciple of Qunawi. So there's this lineage of discipleship reaching back to Ibn Arabi himself, the Sheikh. And so these form the most authoritative. So Jami collects this. That's why it's Naqd an-Nusus, a selection of texts, selected texts, commenting on Naqsh al-Fusus. Now, this was the first of Jami's prose works. And the last of his prose works was also a commentary on the Fusus itself, not the Naqsh. So a lot of his poetry and a lot of everything that's in between the first prose work and the last prose work, we have other works that appear. And Jami was, in other words, really captivated by the writings of Ibn Arabi. He was a Sufi, Naqshbandi Sufi, and but his like intellectual, spiritual affiliation was really oriented towards the school of Ibn Arabi and the writings of Ibn Arabi. And he was an amazing and a great scholar, and he really did justice to the whole commentarial tradition. And so, in other words, his commentary, Naqsh al-Fusus, is homage to the earliest commentators. So what happened was, I found this to be a perfect point of departure, again, for my own study of the Fusus. Because when you read the Fusus goes in a lot of tangents. It's quite long in terms of not the actual text itself, but a lot of the commentaries. There's a lot of commentaries on Fusus. So I wanted to get to the heart of the matter, and the heart of the matter is, firstly, Ibn Arabi's own commentary, or his own distillation, which is Naqsh. So to understand the Fusus, you go straight to the author himself, meaning Ibn al-Arabi, who writes the first layer, the first commentary, meaning the Naqsh, the first extraction, and then it was kind of natural for me to go to Jami's commentary, but that was also because of my teacher, who was teaching us Naqsh al-Fusus and relying on Jami's commentary at times. And so that was kind of the trajectory of this. And he really does justice to the work. It's a beautiful text. It's a really rich. I wish I could say it's a beginner's text. It's not, unfortunately. It's complicated, and I had a lot of, let's say, challenges trying to grasp the text, try to understand the text, and I went through so many revisions, and each time I went through it, I found a new meaning, a new layer of meaning to the text. So it was definitely a journey.
Yeah, we truly stand on the shoulders of giants in terms of our tradition, and we are
Hmm.
lucky to have the works of the ulama and the awliya and the sufia who've done so much. It's truly a treasure trove, and then we have to thank people like yourself who are bringing it to the contemporary world, making it accessible for people like myself and many of our listeners. So, on this podcast, we try to always get to the core deep concepts, not just talk about a historical um, construction of particular texts, but also the actual hikmah, the wisdom behind them. So, with that said, I wanted to ask you some questions actually directly about, based on your own study for this book or the research you've done about the fusus and some concepts that me personally that I've also, I've thought about it. And every time I've tried to approach the fusus, I've always been so intimidated by it. Like I've just not been able to truly grasp it. And so I've always kind of like kept my distance, even though I have a longing to understand it. So I understand from my limited knowledge about it that the Fusus, as you mentioned, it's about prophetology. It embodies the hikmah of each prophet. Essentially, it kind of like almost in an archetypal fashion, where it goes through the lives of the prophets and then mentions the archetype behind them and then the metaphysics behind that prophetology. Could you just go into a little bit of depth about that? Like perhaps maybe using some of them as an example, like let's say Abraham or Jesus or Moses, like any of these prophets as an example from your study. Like what does it say about them? What did you learn and how did that move you? Like if you could just go into that.
Sure. This is one of the challenges of a book the size and the capacity of Fusus, is that it's possible to read sections of it or selections of Fusus, but it's quite challenging to read the whole thing cover to cover and grasp the whole thing. And this has been one of the blessings of working on this type of text, that Jami is a very methodical thinker, a very clear thinker, and a very good writer, is an excellent scholar. So the scholarship is there, the research is there, the understanding is there. It's really an excellent entry point into the whole world of Ibn Arabi, especially the Fusus tradition. So I would say that before somebody goes in studying the Fusus and reads the commentaries, or attempts to read some of the commentaries, which are quite long, this would be an excellent starting point, because each chapter is pretty small and self-contained. And what it also does by working on a text like Naqsh and then Jami's commentary of Naqsh, because Naqsh alone is not sufficient. It's not enough to give you a proper understanding of what's going on. It's coded, and it's symbolic. And this is how the Ulama they write. They write in symbolic language. So whether it's poetry or some of the prose, they write in code. Partly because some of the knowledge isn't for everyone's consumption. So there is a type of initiation that needs to be done before one can grasp these ideas. So what happens is you come across a text like this and you don't understand it and you leave it. And this is kind of what they want. It's like, if it's, you see what I mean? And the reason why this is what they want is because the door to understanding this knowledge, this sacred knowledge, is through a master. And this is kind of the underlying theme of the Fusus. The Fusus al-Hikam is prophetology, and not just some theological idea of a prophet. We have this sacred idea of a prophet. But what is a prophet? The prophet is a spiritual master, is the sheikh. He's the sheikh of his time. His sahaba, his companions, are his disciples. That's it. The relationship between a nabi and the sahaba and the people of his time is between the sheikh and the disciples. So if you want to understand the deen according to this vision, it's vital to understand the relationship between the master and the disciple. And of course, God is the first master. That's why the Prophet says, Adabani Rabbi. God had taught me adab, trained me. فَأَحْسَنَ تَأْدِيبِ. And perfected it and done it well. So the first training is the training of the Prophet. And this is actually the underlying theme of the Quran itself. And this is why we look at the narratives of the prophets. We see that each story of the prophet is a learning moment of a prophet. Otherwise, what's the point of this mention of Nuh? When for example, Nuh, his son, he's tested with his son. His son is about to drown, and then Nuh complains to God. It says, but he's my family. And then God chastises him. He says, he's not your family, and don't ever question my wisdom like this again. Otherwise, you will be considered one of the ignorant ones. So in other words, Nuh didn't differentiate between haqiqah, the spiritual family, the real family, and the material family. So he was thinking about his family, his love, his lineage. But God is saying, look, the real family is the family of in haqiqah. And so there's a lot of lessons there, just in that one interaction between Nuh and God, and that one interaction. Of course, the ship and the ark and all of that. All of these are different lessons, obviously, to learn from the story. And so Ibn Arabi is also emphasizing in Fusus this idea of each one of these prophets is a spiritual master. And so this is one of the reasons why the writings of the mystics are elliptical, dense, or they say, they're locked. They're not accessible. Inaccessibility is part of the program. And that's one thing. The second thing is that some of the realities cannot be expressed except in this way. Like ism lil musamma. It's named, or it's expressed in this way because the haqiqah is complicated. There's no other way to express it. So this is the beauty of studying Arabic, is that the Arabic language lends itself to so many different mutations, permutations, interpretations. It is a really rich language like that. So when you read a text like this, cover to cover, or study it, you do find some underlying themes, some things that strikes you as a repetitive theme, a repeating theme in many of the different fusus. Let me get to one right here, okay? And I want to talk about the Prophet Musa alayhi salam. Prophet Musa, the fuss of Musawi is uluwiyya, supremacy. From al-a'la. So as the verse says in Surah 20, verse 68, he says, "Do not fear, it is you who are the superior." So God refers to Musa as superior to the Pharaoh. Why? Because Pharaoh claimed, "Ana rabbukum al-a'la." So Pharaoh claimed uluwiyya, but his uluwiyya was false, based on false premise. Even though he was the supreme leader of the land, it was not in haqiqah, it was only in the material realm. In haqiqah, Musa had supremacy. Musa was superior. So God elevated him above the Pharaoh. The other thing too about Musa is he's recognized as among the possessors of resolve. Ulul azm. And the possessors of resolve are those prophets or individuals of firm determination and resolve. As God affirms in the verse, he says, "We took from the prophets their covenant. From you, Muhammad, from Nuh, Ibrahim, Musa, and Jesus, son of Mary. We took from them a solemn covenant." This is Surah 33, verse number 7. And so in this particular fuss, we see that what is particular about Musa's supremacy is his azm, his resolve. And this is a theme that Ibn Arabi talks about. He mentions this particular idea of resolve. He calls it jam'iyyat al-himma, concentrated resolve, focused willpower. And he equates that in the Fas Muhammadi by saying that the Quran is also has this concentrated resolve, or this concentration, because it's the collection of all the divine books. It's the concentration. In any case, here Ibn Arabi writes, he says, "The lives of all of those whom Pharaoh killed for his sake flowed into Musa." This is from the Naqsh.
Wow.
So Pharaoh kills all the children. Okay? The Bani Israel, he kills all of them. Except for one, meaning Musa. So Musa survives. And then when he fled, Musa fled out of fear. There's a moment where he fled. It wasn't out of fear. It was to preserve the lives of the slain. In other words, he had a mission to accomplish. So he fled for the sake of others. God bestowed upon him messengership, speech, meaning he was the interlocutor with God, even though outwardly he had a speech impediment, inwardly he was the interlocutor of God. So this is, again, going back to the haqiqah.
Amazing.
And then he gave him imamate. He was a leader, imam, and which means hukum. He had governance, hukum. And then God spoke to him in the very form of his need, because of the total outpouring of his resolve into it. I'm just reading from Ibn Arabi's Naqsh al-Fusus. From this we learn that gathered concentration, jam'iyyah, is efficacious. What does that mean? Okay, so I'll explain. Jami will explain in a moment. So when one comes to know something of this nature, he may be led astray from the path of guidance, while another is guided by it, according to Ibn Arabi. Musa goes, this is the story. Musa goes and he needs fire. So he goes and he goes seeks fire. And when he went off, God spoke to him from the burning bush, because this is what he needed. This is important. This is an important lesson here. When divine theophany comes, it comes through a correspondence between your need and what God wants to communicate to you. The reason, what's the connection? What's the electricity between the two things? The positive charges, or these charges. The connectivity is the himma. Because you desire something, you need something, your mind is focused on that thing. It may be, for example, a person has illness. So this is like the wisdom behind trials and tribulation. It's that God is creating the circumstance whereby you are now attentive, because it's your need. And in your need, he speaks to you. But if he spoke to you in everyday activity, you wouldn't pay attention. And he does speak to you every day. But how many of us are negligent of the divine communication? And this is what differentiates between an arif, somebody who is attentive, who's awake, who listens to divine speech, and someone who is ordinary, ghafil, negligent. So this is an example where Moses directed his entire resolve towards seeking fire because he needed it. And in that moment, God disclosed himself in the form of fire, so that Moses would turn toward him in the very form of what he was seeking and not turn away. For had God revealed himself in the form other than fire, Moses, owing to the focused concentration of his resolve, would have turned away from him and towards what he was seeking. And had Moses turned away from him, that act would have been reciprocated, meaning God too would have turned away from him.
Allah.
So in other words, divine disclosure is not some grandiose thing that happens to the urafa, the saints, the awliya, the anbiya. It comes to the normal individual in the form of their need. When you need something in life, whether it's health or wealth or some even mundane thing, your concentration is in that thing. You focused. And in that moment is the time to seek God, or is to listen to God. At that moment, you should be in that concentrated state of being. You're seeking your need. But at that very moment is a time God may speak to you. This is the time of connectivity. So this is a false idea that, in order to reach God, you have to disconnect from everything. You have to be completely detached from all things. On the contrary, Moses is completely focused in the fire. He needs this to survive. And in that need, God comes to him. But the difference is that Moses recognizes God's speech.
Oh.
So this is al-wahda fi ayn al-kathra. This is tawheed in the real sense of the word. But if you disconnect from the world, trying to see God, this is half of tawheed. This is theoretical tawheed. Real
Mm.
tawheed is al-wahda fi ayn al-kathra. Is God, seeing God in all things. This is what it means, seeing God in all things. This is what a beautiful lesson from the
Subhanallah.
Fusus. And this is the hikmah of the Urafa. So Ibn Arabi isn't just writing cosmology, he's writing like some beautiful messages of spiritual
Yeah.
methodology. How do you connect with God? Where do I find God? Where?
Yeah.
Is it in the salah, in prayer? At the Kaaba? At the Khanagah? Where do you find God? And he writes, and this is an amazing statement. He says, he found God disclosed himself in the very form of Moses' need.
Subhanallah.
So God might disclose himself in the very form of your need, could be health or wealth or something else. And so we learn from this a couple things. Number one, where does God appear? We find we can locate God. This is huge. You have a GPS now. You want to find God? Where do you find him? You can find him where your attention is. And number two, the greater the resolve, the clearer the channel. With anything. The greater the resolve, the clearer and the more efficacious you will become. To the point where some of the Urafas say that resolve is a pen in existence. And a lot of New Age people have talked about this, about visualization, about
Manifestation.
manifestation, all of that thing,
Yeah.
right? What does that mean? It's true. It just means that when you resolve on a thing, when you decide on a matter, as I heard this one really wonderful quote, the universe,
Yeah.
yeah, what is it? Can
The
you know this?
universe, the entire universe conspires to get it to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
universe conspires to assist
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And this is tajalli. That's what it means. The universe meaning wujud conspires. Everything falls in place. It's kind of like all these magnets, all these particles, they align when there's a magnetic force. They all align in the same direction. Why? Because the magnet, that magnetic pole, is your resolve. It has a magnetism.
Mm.
It has directionality. And this is what's happening a lot in the Fusus. He talks about this concentrated resolve, not only in the case of Musa, but also in the case of Zechariah. Because he couldn't have a child, and then he was an old man. And so concentrated resolve, he talks about that. He talks about concentrated resolve with the Prophet and the Quran, meaning the Quran is this kind of concentrated resolve. It's in Fas Muhammadi. Anyway, concentration is efficacious. Concentration is both an action and effect produced through resolve, which entails a directing of one's intention and focus with all of one's faculties. And so just like you can be guided through concentration, you can be misguided through it because it's a powerful force.
Mm.
Anyway, so this was one story from the Fusus. There's many. Each fuss is a world, beautiful text.
Subhanallah. I was quiet because I was honestly like so truly moved. You can't see it, but I have goosebumps right now. And it's because it's the profundity of this all. It's with what's going on in the world right now. The the absolute zulm we see around the world, particularly in places like what's happening in Palestine, you start naturally you start thinking about this concept of divine hiddenness. Like people ask, like, where is
Yeah.
God? But then, God is truly everywhere, and He is where you need Him most. It's a child needs his mother the most when he's upset or if he's hurt. A patient needs a doctor most. I don't need a doctor when I'm healthy. I need a doctor when I'm sick. And so it's that sickness is actually me becoming the cause for me to go to the doctor. And in this case, the doctor being God. So it just flips the dichotomy. Like it just,
Hmm.
worldview is entirely flipped, right? So that
Right.
the pain then becomes a means to get to God. And so it's profound. And thank you so much for sharing that. I wish I we could literally just go through first by first and just get you to like talk about every single one of them. But and of course, unfortunately, the tragedy of life is such that we never have enough time.
Hmm.
Um, but I do want to get into some of my concluding questions. But before I do that, actually, is there something else that you would, anything that you particularly would like to bring up? Um, you know, let's say any fuss that you wanted to talk about, or anything that I didn't touch on, particularly about the book.
I mean, I think we can read the full. Just want to say this one last few things. I mean, we can go through
Please,
all the different fusus
please.
and it's never ending. But um, I would say there's maybe some advice going forward to how to read this text. One is to read the fuss as an individual chapter, and one to see it as connected to a larger piece
Mm,
and then a larger piece. So there's like these different layers to see the fusus and to see the sir of fusus, naqshul fusus,
mm,
and then you can expand your horizon and you can see that what are some of the general themes that it's not only about the prophets, but it's actually about insan. It's this whole book is a story of insan.
mm,
It's a biography of insaniya.
mm.
So it's not just a biography of the prophets or the prophetology, the philosophy of prophets,
Yeah.
but it's a philosophy of the human being, insan.
Mm,
And this is why he begins with Adam. So you can look at it as um and this is the problem. It's okay, well, I can't be like Moses and I can't be like Ibrahim and I can't be like these other great individuals. The reason why we think like this is because we sacralize them beyond what is not necessarily. I mean, they are great individuals. We don't really know what their haqiqa is. But we do know that they were human beings, just like us. We do know that they also had a spiritual trajectory and development. And we also know that it's possible that their existence was for guidance and to be emulated. It's not that they are some alien form of life that is which is to be revered and sacralized, almost worshipped, and we have nothing to do with it. Oh, you can't be like Abraham, or you can't be like the prophet. No, actually, you can, in your own capacity. And this is one of the themes is to see where we can emulate this individual or that individual, spiritually and otherwise. Number one. So there's a reading of it. There's a practical dimension to a book like this. That this is a manual for the human being, just like the Quran is the manual for life. This is a manual for insan. So that's kind of one way I would say one approach to the fusus, a practical approach to it.
beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Mokhtar.
Yeah.
Um, as we conclude, there's a question it's pertinent to ask. It's been on my mind for a while, and then you mentioned something while you were talking about the book, and then it just reinforced that question, which is the concept of the master,
Mm.
and how these books. It's hard to approach these books without a master. And I'm going to ask a very practical question. Um, and pardon me if it's a bit crude as well, but for somebody like myself, we live in the West. Most of us, we have jobs, we have lives, careers, and as much as some of us might want to, leave that and study, go to the Muslim world, for example, look for a master, study at their feet, learn these texts from them. It's it's for a lot of us, it ends up being just a dream and
Hmm.
something that's not really fulfilled. Not everybody gets as lucky or gets the chance to be able to do that. So, what is your advice for somebody like that? And on that note, I know that you also have some sort of courses that are coming out soon, where you will be working through some of these texts. Could you tell us something about that, and also just in general tell us about how should a student or seeker, especially somebody living in the West or even in the Muslim world, but who doesn't necessarily have access to a sheikh, how do they go about doing this?
Okay, I can't answer the question because I'm not saying that everybody must go and leave and go find a spiritual master. It may or may not be practical. I'm not going to even broach that topic at this moment. But what I can say is that number one, we all need a teacher and a master for everything we do.
Mm,
Even if you want to learn to play the piano,
mm,
you're not going to just be able to start reading music and just like hitting the keys. They all look very similar.
yeah,
What's how do you produce music
yeah,
from all of this? It's very sophisticated and mathematical. So you need a teacher. It's just a practical thing. It's not some big spiritual principle. If you want to learn anything, you need a teacher. You need to
mhm,
go to school. Now, what we do is we say, "Oh, I need to have a spiritual master." Actually, you don't need a spiritual master right now.
mm,
What you need to do is due diligence.
mm,
You need to study the texts. You need to study the works that the job that you have to do right now is to learn what's in front of you
mm,
and basic things. Okay, uh, studying Arabic.
mm,
The Quran is in Arabic. There's no that we have to learn Arabic. I always say this in every talk and every lecture, unabashedly, unapologetically.
yeah,
If you want to study and you want to learn religion and spirituality, meaning the Quran, you have to go and learn some Arabic.
mm,
And I'm not saying you have to be fluent in spoken, but you have to understand the language of the Quran. Number
yeah,
one,
yeah,
okay, that's doing diligence. Put in the work, put in the hours. And do you have to go study in the Middle East now? No, you don't. There's all kinds of material on YouTube. There's academies. There's all kinds of learning platforms that will help you to get to where you need to go.
mm,
And so this is exactly kind of what I had thought of as well, is that look, I have a lot of this material. I've studied with a teacher for so many years, and how do I now in the West disseminate this knowledge? So I built a platform. It's just in the beginning stages now. It's called the Word Academy.
mm,
In the very beginning stages. I'm going to launch very soon. But the idea here is that we're going to do a close reading. These are durus,
mm,
lessons,
mm,
not lectures. See, there's a difference between university style lectures because when I teach class at the university, I have to think about my audience as being people who are coming for like general education requirements, people who want to maybe study, get a summary or a broad view of like Islamic history.
yeah,
That's fine. Those are college level courses. In the traditional way of learning, we take a text like Fusus, or we take a text like something else, even the Quran, for example, and then you go word for word, word by word.
mm, mm,
And so that's why it's called the Word Academy, because we're focusing on the text.
mm,
First, you learn the text, you study the text with the teacher, like as I've studied with these texts with the teacher. And then Thereafter, you build a foundation, an intellectual foundation, which is your reservoir of spirituality.
Mm.
Spirituality without engaging the intellect is is hollow. Very
Mm.
often, it's hollow.
Mm.
Not always, but it can be, or it can be very easily misguided. This is why Allah gave us an intellect to engage with it, to learn.
Mm.
So we need to engage the intellect. And so what these texts do, they're spiritual texts, so that's there, that's in place. But we need to start to develop a way in understanding how to read these texts. This is another problem. The
Mm.
reason why we don't read these Islamic texts is because we don't know how to read them.
Mm.
It's difficult. Either there's a language barrier, and even if they're translated, trust me, try to read Ibn Sina,
Mm.
right? Even in English, after a paragraph, you're gonna close the book.
Yeah, I actually have the metaphysics of the healing right there, and I tried reading it, and it's just so hard. I
It's
couldn't.
so hard. It's so impossible to decipher the way of argumentation, the language, the
Yeah.
syntax, the way of thinking about things. Okay, and this is ancient,
Mm.
text. So anyway, this is what I plan to do. Is I plan to teach these texts
Inshallah.
very deliberately as say like long-term courses. Like we need at least a year to finish Fusus or
Mm.
Naqsh al-Fusus.
Mm.
Um, there's a course I'm teaching on Introduction to Philosophy, also epistemology, the theory
Mm.
of knowledge.
Mm.
But it's not just a survey, of course. We're looking deeply into the argument. It's durus.
Yeah. No, it is it's
Yeah,
extremely important to have something
yeah.
like that, and we're very lucky that you are doing that. And I'll just repeat again for our listeners, it's called the Word Academy. And
Hmm.
if somebody wants to sign up, is there a website for that right now, or is it going to be up soon?
It will be up very shortly,
Okay.
just a
And
couple weeks.
would it just be thewordacademy.com? Does
Dot
that
.org, the Word Academy, thewordacademy.org.
thewordacademy.org? Okay. So
Yeah,
yeah, and then people can sign up for the courses there.
yeah,
Yeah, no, that is amazing. Inshallah, I'll sign up myself as well. I'm sure
yeah.
there's many of our listeners who would sign up. There is a huge dearth of this knowledge, and it's beautiful that we always technology is something that people, especially traditionalists like ourselves, we always kind of give it a lot of slack, but there's some benefit, actually a lot of benefit to this, and part of that is you and I are sitting like thousands of miles apart, and we're able to communicate, as well as the fact that we can learn from people like yourself,
Hmm.
uh, sitting in the comfort of our home. So that's amazing, inshallah. Dr.
I mean,
Mukhtar,
even now, sorry,
please,
let
please.
me say one thing. Even now, I study hundreds of hours of
Yeah.
durus with my own teacher on Zoom.
Wow.
Hundreds of hours,
Amazing.
you
Yeah.
know? And this is an ongoing thing year after year. Back in the day, I needed to be there present.
Yeah.
Obviously, right? There was no other way to disseminate this knowledge. You had to
Yeah.
be in the presence. But now technology, the world has changed.
Yeah.
And yeah, you should go and visit your teacher and do all that. But if you want to learn, here's the thing, we must learn. We must put some effort into learning. I think this is lost in a lot of Islamic culture.
Yeah.
This, we're like, okay, oh, learning is going to college, getting a secular education, getting your
Yeah.
PhD. That's not it. You need to learn to read classical texts in our tradition, which are spiritual
Yeah.
spiritual texts.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not easy. Believe me, if reading Muqaddamat al-Qaysari, it needs to be done very deliberately. And you can maybe um, read a few pages of it, get
Yeah.
some extracts from it. But what I want to do is I want to have a sustained reading of that or a study of that. And a
Mm.
course allows that. It's not just a one-off lecture here, a seminar there.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
It needs a proper study.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
So that's the idea there.
once again, like we're super great, like lucky and privileged at the fact that somebody like yourself will be doing this, inshallah.
Inshallah.
And I hope the listeners, from what they've listened to today, it opens up doors for them, inshallah. which leads them to further learning this ilm, this knowledge, this hikmah. Dr. Mukhtar, it is always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Today's episode was truly moving. And,
Alhamdulillah.
especially in the middle, like the reason I was quiet was because I was trying to absorb it all. And it was beautiful. May God always bless you. May He put barakah in your knowledge. And may you continue to
Inshallah.
do what you're doing. And maybe continue to learn from the beacons of knowledge, such as yourself. Um, I'd like to thank you once again. And also thank your teachers who passed the knowledge on to you all the way from the Prophet peace be upon him. So thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much for having me. And alhamdulillah, this was a very fruitful conversation. I benefited a lot. And then, keep up
Alhamdulillah.
the wonderful work that you're doing. This is really important to take out the time to have these conversations. This is really a real service that you're doing for people worldwide. So thank you for doing this in a very professional and enlightening way. So
Thank
alhamdulillah,
you.
inshallah, well, hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Inshallah. Thank you so much, Dr. Mukhtar. It means a lot. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Take care.
Take care, everyone. Take
Okay.
care. Masalam.